Hello, we want to welcome you today again to the state of our world. And our discussion today is a very good discussion about the plight of the LGBTQ community. I'm Alan. I'm a retired university professor and pastor. And with me, I'll let my co-host introduce himself and start us out with the first question.
Yeah, my name is James Ash, and I'm a pastor, a local area pastor in the Walla Walla Valley. And so I've been here a couple of years, and today we're talking about a very sensitive subject. And I think it's very important, first of all, to explain that, while this is a sensitive subject, it's a current subject today, we need to be utmost careful because there are many people who are caught in this situation, this dilemma of LGBTQIA, and we'll talk about some of those letters. And in fact, why don't we begin with that very question? Let's define some of our definitions here, Alan, because I think it's important for some people. Obviously, most people probably who are watching this knows what those letters stand for. But let's be clear at the very beginning. What does LGBTQ stand for?
Well, there are people that have other ideas, but technically it is lesbian, gay, bisexual, meaning that they go both ways,
Okay.
Transgender, and queer or questioning.
Okay, so let me stop right there. When you say lesbian, this is referring to women attracted to women, right? When you say gay, sometimes gay can be either a man attracted to a man or a woman attracted to a woman. It can be used interchangeably, but principally, I think in the acronym, it refers to men attracted to men. Bisexual, meaning a woman could be attracted to either another woman or another man, or vice versa, the man could be attracted to women. In traditional understanding of that, or attracted to a man, and then you go to queer. Now, queer can be just a regular person who just could be like an advocate, somebody who's supportive of the movement. And what about questioning? What is that?
Well, there are some people that are not sure.
They're not sure.
The younger people, they're in school and they're trying to make up their mind, and we have influences there, so they're just questioning and haven't made up their mind yet.
So there's a few other acronyms, part of the acronym. There's the I and the A. What does that stand for?
Well, those are recent.
Okay.
They've added on intersexual. Those are people they can't help it. They're born with both organs in their body, and
How common is this?
oh man, it's like one in every 100,000 or 200,000.
They're
it's very rare.
extremely rare.
Yeah.
Extremely rare. It's a genetic abnormality that causes them to be born with both sexual organs. And so at that point in time, actually the doctor, usually in consult with the parents, they make a decision one way or another, and then sometimes the child later on says, they made the wrong choice.
And that's unfortunate. They're in an unfortunate situation.
That's right.
They can't help.
What about the A, the asexual?
Asexual, they have no sexual attraction to anyone.
Okay.
And, there's nothing wrong with being celibate, and living alone, and not being married.
Again, live a very fulfilled life.
Right. So,
as a A.
Yeah, I don't see a problem with that, and I don't think society has any issue there.
Yeah.
There are no struggles there at all.
So, Alan, this whole issue, this has been a tsunami, really, that's been rolling across our nation here, and most recently, at least in the last couple of years, it's become less and less of an issue about the L's, the G's, and the B's. But now we've really been focusing as a society very heavily upon transgenderism. So please help me to understand, what is a trans man or a trans boy? What kind of person is that?
And it's confusing because if you're female at birth and you decide you want to be male, that would be a trans boy or trans man. And so if you say a trans woman, that's one who was born a man, and has decided he wants to be a woman.
So genetically, he has the XY chromosomes in his every cell of his body, but he just internally, he doesn't feel like he identifies with the gender assigned at birth. That's the terminology that they're using. Okay, so we're going along with that, at least for now. And so when you say trans woman, think about the destination. That's what they want to become. They want to become a trans woman. So if it's trans man, it's the trans man. This is a woman that's trying to become, at least in her mind, trying to become a man. What about non-binary?
Yeah, a person who doesn't really describe their gender identity. They're not exclusively a man or a woman.
Yeah, they don't feel, I
don't belong on either way, side.
None of the above.
Yeah,
it's the none of the above. Okay, so let's dig into a little bit of history here. Talk about the original hypothesis. Unpack that for me. How did this all come to be?
Well, there was. If you get into the gay community, they say that this all came about through evolution.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, through description of Darwin, and they say that it came about because men wanted to improve their situation in life and wanted to climb the ladder, and so they attached themselves to another man. That's their explanation. And if you go back in history, there has been a description of the gay lifestyle all the way back as far as I've ever read, as far as we have written history.
Right.
And it comes out in 1400 BC. We have
in the Bible era, right?
That's when Moses wrote the Bible. There were some, how would you say it? Some.
It was beginning to manifest itself.
Yeah.
Definitely manifesting itself, because God comes out, and specifically in the Levitical laws, and in Leviticus, 18 verse 22, God spoke to Moses. And so God's speaking here. God is establishing law. And you don't establish laws where there's not cases. We don't.
Right. Exactly.
Generally, laws get established where a situation occurs, and then we're like, okay, yeah, we need to address that. So we formulate a law. Here, God speaking says, "You shall not lie with a male as with a woman; it is an abomination." So, in God's eyes, this is outside of the box of His plan for humankind.
Right. Yeah. And so, you go back to 1400 BC. It evidently was an issue at that time. So that's as far back as we have written documents that claim that, yes, there were gay men at the time. It doesn't say too much about the women, but there were gays at that time.
Now, in the Bible, it doesn't really talk about transgenderism, but keep in mind that transgenderism doesn't always mean that they go to, they go to a surgical ward and they start carving up body. Transgenderism can be as simple as wearing the opposite gender's clothes. And so while the Bible doesn't talk about sex reassignment surgeries, the Bible does talk about wearing opposite gender clothes.
Yeah, Deuteronomy 22, it says, "A woman shall not wear anything that it pertains to a man, nor shall a man put on a woman's garment. For all who do so are an abomination to the Lord."
Again, that word abomination, it doesn't mean, now let's be very clear, God is not calling people abominations.
No.
God is calling the action an abomination. Let's be very clear.
And all through our discussion, we have to realize that, because all of us have had friends who were possibly in the gay community. And I've known some guys that were pretty nice guys, So I have to say that there's no hatred there. We're just trying to get straight what's going on in society today.
That's right.
What's going on around the world, in the United States. And then later we can talk about what the Bible may say about it.
So let's delve a little bit later in history. We're talking about the Greek era and the Roman era.
Yeah, in the Greeks, there was this going on in the army.
A lot.
I know with Philip and Alexander the Great, his father and Alexander the Great, there is talk about that and in his travels and down in Egypt and so forth. I've read some articles. So within the Greek army, this was happening.
Yes.
Now, when you get down to the Roman army, things had changed totally. And if they found somebody involved in this type of activity in the Roman army, they'd beat them to death.
So taking an extreme position on the other side instead of a promiscuous, it's an attack.
Totally changed. In the Dark Ages, we have a lot of this going on, and it was going on in monasteries too, and places that was our church at that time, the Christian church. So we're not proud of that.
Yeah.
But it didn't hit the United States really hard until the 1960s, the late 1960s.
The sexual revolution.
There was a sexual revolution, exactly.
Alfred Kinsey and that whole thing. You can look that up online. It's all there.
Yeah. So that was taking place, and there were marches. Marches on the street, people wanting the government to take some action because they felt like they didn't have the rights that everybody else had.
That's right.
And
so now our society really has gone, kind of to the extreme away from what the Roman society is. Now, ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, is really been a kind of a champion of these kind of LGBT rights. What rights do they feel that LGBT individuals deserve to enjoy?
Yeah, and I might say that going back around the world, this is taking place, and we'll get into the United States. Sure. I put up a chart there that shows. The left side is those who are totally against it, marriage, gay marriage, and on the right side, those who approve, the countries that approve. And by far today in the world, there's more that approve, especially in Europe. It's very common.
Right.
So going back to this again, there are rights that the LGBT community feel they should have and don't. And that's, for one, is sometimes people refuse to rent a house to them once they find out. And that is one of the things they are clamoring for through the ACLU. Use of restrooms.
Of choice.
And that's more to do with the transgender than it is the gay and lesbian. The transgender doesn't have the same organs as the other women in the bathroom, possibly, or in the men's bathroom. And then, getting into this, I could tell an interesting story. I used to live in South America, and I can remember among the Indians down there, there was a group called the Campa Indians, and you're talking about dress. The men would have... they all wore a robe made out of the same material, men and women. But the men had a vertical line going through them, stripes, and the women had horizontal. You'd never find the man in a woman's gown.
Oh, my.
But there was the exact same garment, except the stripes were different.
Wow, that's fascinating. So it was very clear which was a man's garment and which was a woman's garment.
Yeah, and then one time I was in Bolivia. I used to live in Bolivia, and I can remember that they put on the doors of the bathroom some symbols from Europe. One was a bolo hat, and the other was a glove and purse. It didn't say men and women. And I can remember this woman from the Altiplano, the women all wear these bolo hats.
Oh my.
So I was in the bathroom, and here comes a woman walking in.
Oops.
And I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
She thought that was for women. But today we have men getting into showers with women, and some in the schools or sports, they want to share the showers, and there's a problem. There, there's a lot of complaint.
Lawsuits too.
There was a lawsuit
Major
recently.
lawsuits. NCAA, I know, have received a lot of lawsuits.
The sorority girls complaining, and that they're being peeked into, and a lot of things going on.
So
right
gay
now.
gay marriage, of course, came before the Supreme Court, and it was approved.
Yeah.
Adoption of children.
Right. right.
That's become a hot button topic.
Not hiring people or firing people because they're of, the gay community or lesbian community. And so sometimes they're fired and they will file a lawsuit saying, I was fired because I'm
Wrongfully,
gay.
yes.
And it may, then it goes to court, and
Right.
the company has to say, no, it was because of your work. And so this is going back and forth in the news all the time.
It's a real quagmire of issues, and there's a lot of scenarios and questions that LGBTQ people ask, and they're raising these issues in our society today. Walk me through some of these.
Yes, I've listed them. Can an employer discriminate against me because of sexual orientation or gender identity? That's one question that's coming up, and the gay community, they're asking this question of society. Can a landlord refuse to rent to a gay person or LGBTQ? Are they protected from discrimination in public accommodations such as shops, restaurants, when they go out into the public? We didn't used to have these issues because people kind of kept their private life private.
Sure.
But now that it's become more public, coming out and so forth and getting on the streets, these are issues. And they also ask, does the law protect us, that is the LGBTQ, from the use of restrooms that are consistent with our gender identity? We talked about that a little bit. So now a lot of the restrooms are just plain restroom with a lock on the door, more individual restrooms, and that seems to have been solving the problem.
Right.
Another problem also is it possible, there must have been some problems with updating their passport, changing ID records like driver's license, and so that's in the questioning too. They often bring that up.
Right. So the PBS News, let's continue on here. PBS News, gay rights advocates say that the antiquated laws are used to harass homosexuals and to point to a new legislation such as the Don't Say Gay law in Florida, which forbids instruction on sexual orientation and gender identity in kindergarten through third grade. Friend, when I think about a first through third grader, I don't want them talking about sexuality either way.
No, little kids.
Little children. These are children. Let the children go and play, on the playground and have fun. Why do we have to make all this sexual thing come into the early grades?
That's what parents are asking. And, like you have kids, and I had little kids, and I can remember asking my son, he was playing with the girls, and I asked him, I said, do you know the difference between boys and girls? And he said, well, Dad, girls have long hair. So I said, I was just checking. But there's a few years there where they need to be innocent and just play and not be driven.
Exactly.
Driven into this problem. What am I? What should I be this other sex? And so they say up to third grade, let's kind of leave it out, and then you can include it in the books after that.
Exactly, and I totally agree with that. We need to allow the innocence of children to develop without just packing them one way or another. But because it's been so pervasively pushed in our society, on the news media, it's been pushed in movies, it's been pushed in our culture. I mean, you can't even go to the store without seeing, pictures of this sort of thing, magazines. Yeah. Now it's affecting the church. So talk to me about major denominations. Now there's a number of different denominations that say the L's, the G's, the B's, it's not sin.
It's true. Yeah, freedom of speech, freedom of let's go on. There's a list of churches here. I'm putting it on the screen up there. There's a list of churches, and there are a lot of them. Some major churches in the United States that say that being gay or lesbian is not a sin. And it must be 50 churches, 50 denominations. So we find these all over the world that say, no, it is not sin. And they don't like it to be presented as sin. So as we go on here, we'll see that many of them are becoming clergy in these churches. It's pretty hard to say you're a member of good and regular standing, but we don't want you to stand on the platform. Likewise, even in the school system, if we have our own school system or a college, once you hire individuals and you say, okay, you are a full-time employee, but you can't climb the ladder. You can't be promoted. You can't be president of the university. So this is an issue.
And that's exactly right. Once there's kind of that entering wedge, kind of a foot in the door, so to speak, it does open. It doesn't happen right away. But opens the door for later on inclusion and so on. Are there church membership or objections to LGBTQ?
Yeah, that's a good question. There are objections, especially in these churches that are allowing them to lead the church. For example, Evangelical Lutheran Church, they have had the ordination of a openly gay, lesbian person. And the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. So the problem with some of these, there's actually one here, Megan Rohrer, who was the first openly transgender leader of a Evangelical Lutheran Church of America. And she evidently had some problems in the church, and they decided to fire her, and she said that's gender discrimination, and she's filing a suit.
Wow.
So there's a lot of things going on there. Openly gay ministers. The Anglican Church of Canada has an openly gay bishop. And these I'm getting out of Wikipedia. I hope they're correct on that.
Right.
And the United Methodist Church now has been this way for some time. And it looks like they have lost about 20% of their congregations. They're pulling out.
Yes.
Of the denomination.
And this is a major denomination within America.
Big.
Major denomination. So when you're talking 20%, you're talking many hundreds and hundreds of churches literally just saying, you know what, we can't go along with this.
I think I was in a nearby town here at the time I was pastoring, and I had a friend who was I believe it was the Evangelical Lutheran Church, and the whole church finally sat down and voted to leave the denomination.
And that's painful.
Just a nearby town here. And
that's painful.
Yeah, it's hard for them. It's hard for the denomination. So it's a problem.
It is a problem. What are the political issues in states regarding gender identity? Because this is the big thing right now, gender identity. What gender do you identify as? And there's a difference, because when we talk about sex, we talk about that in terms of biology. When we talk about gender, that's something that has been a fairly recent phenomenon. People talk about gender. Well, that's what you feel that you are. So
gender identity, yes.
Gender identity. So gender identity is what you feel. If you feel that you're a boy, well, you must be a boy, even though biologically says you're a female. 2 X's.
I read this one on Wikipedia also. New Jersey Governor Philip Murphy doesn't think parents have a right to know of major decisions their kids make at school about their gender identities. You have seen back east some parents hitting the board meetings, and there's some concern.
Oh yeah, more than concern. I mean, it gets pretty warm.
Yeah, they're called domestic terrorists sometimes. They're going into the board meetings and really complaining, not only about that, but some of the pornography in the library and so forth. There's one in Boise, Idaho. This is the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has upheld an injunction against an Idaho law barring transgender athletes from participating in student athletics. The court found that the law likely violates the rights of transgender students under equal protection cases, the cause of in the Constitution. So it is hitting the courts.
In a big way.
Yes, it's hitting the courts.
And it's not going away.
You violated my rights because you don't allow me to swim with the girls or whatever.
Right.
And
that's not going away. With each passing year, it becomes more and more pronounced.
Yeah, now it's hitting the companies.
Yes.
And people have seen it on the news.
In fact, some of these Fortune 500 companies seem to be not just compliant, but they're driving this. So Silicon Valley, you've got big companies like Apple, IBM. You've got major corporations like Walmart, the NFL, of course, major corporation side of things, the NBA, American Airlines. These are all, again, behind, it's kind of a groundswell of support saying, look, anything that speaks out against these issues, they're being bigoted, they're being transphobic. So
they say, we're going to take our money elsewhere. We're not going to spend it in your state.
Right. And so there's a lot of that threat, that economic threat hanging over states and communities.
And it's been going on in Florida, with Disney World and the government in Florida.
Right.
I saw something that came up recently in Louisiana where they were saying, we'll ask these questions of these companies, and if they don't answer those questions correctly, we're not going to support them here in our state. So it's going both ways. Left to right and right to left, they're using
so it's
money.
Polarizing.
Yeah, they're using money to try to control people's lifestyle.
So the ACLU, of course, wades into the very middle of this, and they say, look, you know what? You can't limit free speech. One of the fundamentals of being American is the First Amendment. First Amendment says, Congress shall make no law in regards to, and it lists a number of things, but the right to assemble and the right to freely speak, and free speech. And so as Americans, we look at that and we say, wow, we don't want to limit free speech. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, there are a lot of them. But they just don't want laws prohibiting people who have a certain belief from exercising that belief.
Right.
And we'll get to that in a minute. That is happening all over. They say it's discrimination. There's discrimination in the private sector, and you don't accept what I believe. Now
you're limiting my free speech.
We're going to get down to some issues right here in the state of Washington.
Sure.
We're not sitting in Washington, but in the state of Washington.
Sure.
Where they're having some big issues right now in the state about this. And then, what's the next question you got there?
So churches with LGBTQ clergy, now churches are coming out and saying, we allow for these kind of people to be our church leaders. Yeah.
Now, I would say, in getting into this, that just about all churches would say that they welcome people of the LGBT community in their church. When I was a pastor, I had to talk to some of the elders of the church, and I said, hey, as far as those people attending church here, bring all you can. Everybody needs the gospel. Everybody needs the Lord. When it comes to leading out and representing the church, they need to be church members. And they don't represent our lifestyle. But welcome, they're welcome to come in.
Sure.
And I don't think there's a church in the United States that wouldn't welcome LGBTQ people in the church to listen to the gospel.
I didn't think so either, but I do think that there are
There
some.
may be
There
some.
most definitely are, and that's a sad reality. But there are probably, what I think you mentioned the statistic about 50 churches or church denominations that now allow for an openly gay or lesbian or bisexual person. I can think of one right now in Germany that strikes very close to home, at least in my church. And so this is an issue that is affecting the church.
Right.
Now, what are the public? What happens in church, we don't want to believe this, but what happens in church is oftentimes a reflection of what people believe in the congregation. So what are the public attitudes of same-sex marriage?
Yeah. Well, I'm putting up a picture on the screen there, and that has to do with, there's a light line indicating those who were against it, and the dark line indicating those who are for it. And over the years, just since the year 2000, they have completely swapped places. So now in the United States, those who accept gay marriage, for example, is way up there, way up above 70%. And those who are against it are way low. So that's what's happened in the United States just the last 20 years or so.
And it's especially pronounced among the young, the millennial generation. I think 79% of religious nuns, or those that do not believe in a certain doctrinal belief or whatever, they don't believe in any particular religious.
I'm irreligious.
Yeah, they're irreligious. Yeah. 79% of those say, yeah, sure. Same-sex marriage, sure.
Yeah,
it's not a problem.
And 60% say that businesses should not have to provide services when it conflicts with their LGBT beliefs. In other words, 60% of the people say, hey, if a person doesn't believe in gay marriage, let's say a pastor, that church should not have to be forced to marry them. Or a person maybe making wedding cakes.
Yeah, Jack in Colorado, right?
That happens, yeah.
Right.
A lot of them will just say, well, I'll give you 2 women figures and 2 men figures, and you take care of the rest. But many times they're expected to be at the service and serve the cake and participating in the wedding service, and that they object to. And 60% of Americans say they shouldn't have to be there if their faith does not agree with that LGBTQ.
Right. Now, what about 2/3 of white Protestants today? Now, where is the majority of Protestant America, if we can still call it Protestant America?
Yeah.
Where do they land?
Now, they may say that we don't believe that people should be forced to participate, but they do believe in same-sex marriage. Like you said, 2/3 now. And just a few years ago, it was 1/3. And now it's, in the last 25 years, it's completely switched. It says in Catholics, even among the Catholic Church, 61% say that it should be okay to support same-sex marriage. Not that every church is going to do that. In the world of the weekly, those who go to church weekly, people that go every week to church regularly, only 39% favor a same-sex marriage.
And if they go twice a month?
Twice a month, 66%. In other words, they're not real regular in church.
Right.
But it switches from 39% who approve to 66%
wow.
who approve if they're not regular attenders.
They're irregular.
And then if they just go a few times a year, there are a lot of people that just go on Easter and Christmas time, In fact, a lot of these people that just go Easter and Christmas.
They have a term for that. Have you heard the term? They call them creasters.
Okay.
Creasters.
They are
Christmas and Easter, right?
like in the Netherlands, they're called Christian atheists. There are a lot of Christian
Oh,
atheists.
wow.
70% of the Catholics are Christian atheists in the Netherlands, and it's around 45% of the Protestants are Christian atheists. In the United States, it's 15%, which means I believe Jesus Christ was a great man. He preached a great message that we should follow, but I don't believe he was divine or he came from heaven, went back to heaven. I don't believe any of that. So we have a lot of that in this country, and so they're not going to have the same beliefs about homosexuality, for example,
Sure.
even though they claim to be Christians.
Sure.
They're like the ones that say, no, I don't care about religion, but they do go twice a year because it's cultural.
Yeah.
And those who never attend,
79%.
79% say
So there's a
it's
direct
okay.
relationship between how pious about church attendance a person might be and their belief on their favorability towards same-sex marriage.
Yeah.
So there's that direct relationship. Now,
Is
again,
that-
we talked a little bit about white Protestant America and how that's kind of gone away, but we still follow the white mainline Protestant church because there's a lot of them out there. And so how many are in favor of the ability for, same-sex marriage?
Well, we're showing that 62% now favor allowing gays and lesbians to wed. That's the white Protestant. These are church people.
Right, exactly.
They go to church,
Right.
and they say 62% favor that gays and lesbians should be able to wed, marry. 63% say there's no conflict between their religious beliefs and homosexuality.
So again, very almost identical. So if you don't believe that there's if you don't think that there's a religious injunction that prohibits this, then you say, sure, why not? I have no problem.
Right.
Right.
Okay, so, yeah, and then it says that, this is from Pew Research, by the way, getting us out of the Pew Research Center. And it says the same-sex marriage has grown from 11% in 2004 to 29% today.
Wow. That's an amazing statistic. Let's talk about transgenderism, and then we want to spend the last part of our time together talking about what does the Bible say. Really, culture's all over the map. Culture shifts. We've seen that in the last 20 years. Massive changes in the way that people think about this. But let's talk about before we get to the Bible. Let's talk about transgenderism. What denominations absolutely oppose transgenderism?
Well, the Catholic Church opposes it. The Catholic Church, in fact, with gay, lesbian, Pope Francis has said that being gay is not against the law. There's no law against this, but it is sin. So the Catholic Church has taken that stance. Jehovah's Witnesses, Southern Baptists, there are Baptist churches that say we favor this transgender, we favor homosexuality, or having these people as members of our church. We have to remember that not everybody who is a Methodist is part of that same Methodist organization.
Sure.
Not every Baptist.
Sure.
The Southern
Sure.
Baptists are definitely opposed.
Yes.
So we're not trying to throw everybody.
Sure.
And in fact, if you have a church that is a part of a denomination that accepts this, maybe even accepts them as leaders in the church, there'd be a lot of members in there that don't agree.
Sure.
So we're not throwing everybody into categories that they just don't fit. There's a division. There's a lot going on there where they're dividing churches here and there and everywhere. Even in fact, there may be a church down the street of one denomination that's in favor, and another street down there where same church denomination, and they're opposed. So
Yes.
that happens.
So many different shades. Some denominations they're on one side, same denomination, some are on the other side. Now, transgenderism is a little interesting because really at the foundation of this phenomena is what drives it, and this is something called gender dysphoria. Unpack that. What is gender dysphoria?
There's people who have psychological problems because of their gender. In other words, a girl may say, I'm a girl, but I don't want to be. And so there's anxiety. Just about all transgenders suffer from some type of anxiety, as I have read. And there's an emotional condition. So it's an emotional condition that they have as a result of saying, oh yeah, I'm a boy, but I really want to be a girl.
Sure.
So they have this anxiety going on.
So, and this anxiety, comes out early on. The children don't fully understand what this is, but later on, then they realize, something's wrong inside. I don't seem to identify with the other little boys who are, wanting to play in certain ways in sports and this. I like hanging out with the girls, and it identifies in many different ways. And so this, of course, leads to some wanting to take extreme measures, or measures in which they will go through the process of trying to change to alleviate, I think, that emotional anxiety, that emotional dysphoria on the inside.
Right.
And that's really what the full end of that, is driven towards, is let's try to accomplish this, try to bring peace back to this troubled heart.
Yeah, let's move quickly now.
So post-genderist.
Post-genderist is a person that believes that someday there won't be any gender.
Oh my!
And that people will be neutral as far as gender, and that they'll probably reproduce by scientific methods, cloning. But there are some people that feel that way.
So obviously, again, a very dismal kind of look at the future and so on. But ACLU, coming back to the ACLU, what influences are there on the children, especially as we look at what's going on right now?
Well, we'll have to move quite quickly, but the ACLU is backing laws that keep children from making this gender transition, because they say that is makes them go into this psychological condition we were talking about, and this is parental, how would you say it, parental abuse.
Right.
And so we're going to get into some of that. There is a lot going on in that. I'll have to skip through some, but the ACLU definitely says they have to protect students from violence,
right,
and abuse,
right,
and making sure that the gay teachers, of course, are also protected. It's interesting to note as we get into talking about children that 9% of all teachers in K-12 teachers are gay or LGBTQ.
I didn't know it was that high.
9%.
Wow.
And so definitely they're going to have an influence over young students. Maybe some parents think that they're going to confuse their children, and that's why this thing in Florida is so important. They say, hey, wait till after 3rd grade before talking to our children about these things, because you're dealing with this 9% of the teachers who are pushing it in the schools.
Yes. So it's being pushed on every level. Level.
Yeah. Talking about state, there's a couple of news stations that have come out, and one is in Oregon. it's KNKX News, and they've been talking about how in Oregon lawmakers are expecting to pass a bill that will expand insurance coverage for those who want this transgender change, gender affirming care. So they want the insurance companies to pay for all that.
Of course.
And up in Cairo, in Seattle, you know, Cairo News, they were talking about Governor Jay Inslee recently signed a law in the state of Washington which says that if a child, let's say, goes to school and he's convinced that he needs a transgender change, he needs a change to a different gender, they can pull that child away from the parents. Say the child ran away. They're going to say he ran away. He doesn't want to go home. And then they can start a process of changing that child to the other gender by means of surgery or chemical without the parents' knowledge.
Yes.
Now, if the child says, I am being abused at home, then they'll usually take the child, and within 72 hours they have to tell the parents what's going on. With this, they don't have to talk to the parents. They have no idea whether the child is alive or not. And so this is being challenged right now in the state of Washington because it was to go into effect about the third week of July of the summer, meaning that for this school year, some of these children would suddenly disappear from their home, and the state would keep them and go through this transitioning without the parents' knowledge. This has become a court issue.
Yeah, serious issue. Why don't we jump to the Bible? Because you know, the Bible is very clear. You know, God has given us, you know, some clarity in the Bible. Let's talk about some Bible texts.
How about 1 Corinthians 6? This is a strong one.
Okay.
And Old Testament and New Testament bring this out, of course. Unless you're reading the Queen James version of the Bible instead of the King James version.
That's a real version, is it?
Yeah, it's a version, Queen James version.
The Queen James version.
To try to do away with the texts here that change their meaning.
Okay.
But 1 Corinthians 6:9, do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived. Neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor homosexuals, nor sodomites. Now, when it's saying, it's using the words there, adulterer, we know what that is. Somebody married and has a relationship outside of marriage. Those are pretty easy to deal with. But homosexual and sodomite, one is the arsenokoites is the word in Greek, and the other one is malakos. Malakos, sometimes it's translated effeminate, but it means soft in the original. And so it's relating to a person, it's a person who's soft, effeminate. Usually they were boys. So the one word arsenokoites for homosexual can also be translated as a pedophile in Greek. But anyhow, at any rate, this is what it's saying in the Greek, that homosexuals are sodomites. That's what it's saying. The male, more masculine partner and the more effeminate partner. It says, nor thieves, nor covetous, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor extortioners will inherit the kingdom of God.
So there's a whole list. It's not just, you know,
Exactly.
it's not, God isn't just discriminating against certain people and say, you know, these are the only people that won't come into my house. You know, God is giving a list, and some of these, you know, we could, like a reviler, that can happen in church, you know.
There is a lot.
Covetousness hides very easily in church.
You go down to Revelation 21. I'm skipping down there a little bit. It says, he who overcomes shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he shall be my son. but the cowardly, unbelieving, abominable, murderers, sexually immoral. Now that word sexually immoral is the word that's pornos, was a male prostitute. Porne is a female prostitute. Porneo is the verb for these activities. But it says the sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. So it's talking about liars too.
Yeah.
And it's talking about people who have idols, who don't put God first in their life. There's a lot here. And so the people who are sexually immoral are not alone here.
Right. And I think liars is such a key word that John the Revelator puts out there, because liars all through the book of Revelation, deception is happening.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting. The liars will have the same punishment. So if people think, oh, they're really onto us about this, this is the worst thing in the world, there are other sins that will cause people to be lost. But the Bible is qualifying it as sin.
That's right.
And I think that's why Pope Francis came out and said, yeah, it's not, they're not breaking the law, but it is sin.
Right. And Ephesians 5 verse 5, for this know that no fornicator, unclean person, nor covetous. Notice the word covetous keeps cropping up. And I noticed that this week as we were studying. Who is an idolater has any inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and God.
So the fact that they say that they're not going to be in the kingdom is serious. And in Revelation it says they'll be cast into the lake of fire, which is the second death, permanent death. So we as Christians will look at these texts and say, wow, what are we going to do with this? Some churches say, no, we accept it as normal, and other churches say, no, it is sin. So we have this split in Christianity.
Alan, what makes it so much easier if we can separate the person from the action. And I was just having a discussion today, what our society has such a difficult time is separating an ideology from a person themselves. So in other words, if I talk about a certain person's understanding or ideology, they get all offended. Well, you've aggressed me, microaggressed me, and but really, what the Bible is talking about and what God is talking about is specifically narrowing down and saying these behaviors are not good. I love people. God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son. And
we have to say too that among young people, sometimes they will say, if you don't love my lifestyle, you don't love me. In other words, you're supposed to love. And if you don't agree with what I'm doing, you don't love me. That is an argument that's used over and over again by young people. And God has said, no, love the sinner, but hate the sin. You're not supposed to love the sin. You're supposed to love the sinner. And there's a text there. You got a text there in 1 John.
1 John 1 verse 9. Is that the one?
Yeah.
If we confess our sins, He is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. If we say that we have not sinned, we make Him a liar, and His word is not in us. My little children, these things I write to you so that you may not sin. And if anyone sins, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ the righteous.
Tremendous scripture.
What a promise.
Yeah, we're a real promise. So we have to realize that many of us have sins.
All of us, the Bible says, all have sinned fallen short of the glory of God. In fact, if you look at the Greek, it says, all have sinned and continually. It's a present continuous tense. Continually fall short of the glory of God. The moment that you think that you've got it made and you're just on the right track and nothing, you know what? You're in a dangerous place. the only place that we can be absolutely certain that we're safe is when our eyes are fixed on Jesus, not on other people.
Yeah, and there's a text, in Romans 1 talks a lot about this too, the end of Romans 1.
That's right.
And it talks about homosexuality and so forth. But it mentions various other sins and sinners.
Right.
And it throws them all together, and it says, those who practice such things are deserving of death. And we talked about eternal death in the Bible.
Right.
Not only do the same, but also approve of those who are practicing them. So it is basically saying that approval carries some blame. If you approve of sin, if you approve of pedophile in the church, you carry some blame also. If you approve of murder, if you approve of theft and smash and grab, whatever, you think that's okay, you also carry some blame.
That's right. But again, what you said in Romans 1, another word, and I just see it again, covetousness.
Yeah.
Covetousness, it's so easy, and we have all fallen for some of these envy. Which person hasn't fallen for that one? And a murder, Jesus says, whoever speaks against his brother and calls him names,
yeah,
is guilty of that sin too.
I think the difference here between these sins we're talking about is that we must recognize that it is sin. You take a person who has committed adultery, a person who has committed murder, they're not questioning whether that's right or wrong. But this particular issue we've been discussing today is a problem because so many in our churches, Christian churches, say, well, that's not sin. It's okay.
That's right.
We're loving. We're just showing love. What's wrong with that? So it is not that these sins are so great or they're going to be punished more or anything like that. It's just that they need to recognize that it is also a sin among the other sins mentioned in Scripture. Well, I think we've about wrapped it up for today. So I want to thank everybody for listening. And remember, you can go and find us on the internet. You can just go on there and put in State Line Advent Media, and you click on that, then click on YouTube and videos, and it'll take you into all of our talks that we have been giving. There are more talks like this. So we want to thank you again for listening, and have a good day.